Thank you for your patience, everyone. Happy New Year and welcome back to Holland Lifelong Learning. Thank you to our program sponsors. Tonight it's Mason and Mary Holland and Christopher Cocker of Ameriprise Financial. And tonight's topic is pretty fitting for this week. It is Restaurant Week in Charleston. So it is possible that you have seen some sea beans on some of your menus at your favorite restaurants, or even in some of your delivery boxes to get your food delivered. But you may know sea beans by a different name. I knew it as sea pickle. And this evening, we'll get to know sea beans and some other halophytes or salt-tolerant plants. And we'll learn why they're great for saltmarsh restoration through the lens of Heron Farms, Seawater Agriculture. Our speaker tonight is Sam Norton, the founder and CEO of Heron Farms, Inc. Started an ag tech startup here in Charleston, South Carolina. He did grow up on the coast of South Carolina and attended the College of Charleston for both undergraduate and graduate studies. His recent achievements include nominated for Forbes 30 Under 30 in 2021, first place at the South Carolina Department of Agriculture's Acre Startup Competition, and speakership at TEDx Charleston. In his spare time, Sam works on building a 17-acre permaculture farm and a homestead in the Ace Basin. So please join me in welcoming Sam Norton.
All right. Thanks, Laura. The 17-acre homestead is like kind of a patch of land and a very cold cabin right now, but it will get there. There couldn't be a better place to do this talk. I am a product of all the public schools in Charleston County and have been to the aquarium many times on field trips, and it's fitting that we're sitting out on a bunch of seawater next to some marshland that needs to be restored, and next to a bunch of plants that we'll be talking about tonight. So the problem set we all kind of know. 98% of the water on the planet is salty. The 2% we're using for agriculture, we're not using it appropriately sometimes, and it's not being replenished as fast as we're using it. So we have these two environmental problems which kind of set the stage for the next century and maybe the 22nd century as well, which is too much seawater, too much carbon dioxide. But those are also the inputs for photosynthesis. So if you add light and you add a plant that is adapted to handle salt across its lifetime, you can produce all the same products of agriculture: food, water, fiber, pharmaceuticals, fuels, jobs, and so and habitat, of course. So what Heron Farms is trying to do is to think about the incoming seawater as a resource, even though we know it's causing already some issues in Charleston and Norfolk and coastal places all around the world. So we've kind of been born out of and are building on an existing body of work that is called Halophyte Agriculture or Halophyte Restoration. And so all of this research started back in the 50s and 60s, and then really didn't get going until the last 20 or 30 years. But basically, some folks at the University of Arizona thought about these same types of problems. There's so much seawater. Why are we not using that as an input to do agriculture? Let's go around screening these plants that have adapted to handle salt water and can reproduce in salt water. And let's find out if they have any agricultural uses. And so about 2,000 halophytes were screened at the University of Arizona, and they found a few dozen that were either edible or had some sort of fiber application or pharmaceutical application that seemed like they might be good for agriculture. And fast forward, we get investments from people like Boeing and folks like NASA on the biofuel side, and then Cargill and some of these larger companies on the biotech and pharmaceutical side to take these halophytes, which you can see right outside. This Spartina is a dominant one in the area, to use this free resource of seawater and to turn them into agricultural goods. So what I found as an undergrad and then studied in grad school a little bit was that all or a lot of these outdoor projects, especially the ones that had gone kind of beyond the 1,000-acre scale, were running into the same three problems. And those are basically a land use constraint. We call it NIMBY, or not in my backyard. If you want to do seawater agriculture, you got to be near the coast, or usually it's a brackish aquifer maybe that is still pretty close to the coast. And humans love the coast; it's a great place to live and do trade and things like that. And so this would lead to, well, let's pick a place that's deserted and we'll pump seawater into that low-lying place. It'll be cheap, it'll be free land supposedly. And so some of these large projects were getting started in places like Eritrea, the UAE, and what they ran into and what we found studying this at CFC was that the folks living in the area, let's say on the coast of Eritrea, a group comes in and says, hey, we're going to turn this what we call marginal land into a 10,000-acre farm using salt water. And the folks living there didn't think it was marginal, and they did not want a massive farm in their backyard, and justifiably. So this led to choosing areas which were completely deserted, and that led to problem number two, which is if you choose an area that's completely deserted, it usually doesn't have any fresh water, or the annual evaporation exceeds the annual precipitation, and so you pump seawater onto the land and the water evaporates and it leaves behind salt. And that's not good even for plants that have adapted to handle up to 3 times the salinity of the ocean. And so then there's this third problem of seasonality. So these plants flower in response to photo period. If you look out at the marsh over, in like the end of July, beginning of August, you'll see the Spartina starting to flower and it's starting to change colors. And now most of the halophytes tend to do that. And that causes an issue if you want to get multiple harvests. And so our idea at CFC was, well, what if we can solve those 3 issues by making the farms vertical? We would solve some of the land use constraints because we would not have to go horizontally. What if we thought of salinity as something that was constantly monitored and manipulated by software, and that would take some of the human error out of it? And then if we did this without the sun, we would not run into that issue of the plants flowering and us losing the ability to keep harvesting, etc. So this leads to one of the first versions of us doing this. This is at the Rita Halling Center at CFC. It turns out bringing it indoors and trying to replace the sun and the 8 environmental parameters that nature provides has all sorts of other issues with it. But anyways, we ended up solving the 3 problems that we set out to solve, which was that we just mentioned. And so this was the technical insight that you could solve some of the scalar issues with seawater agriculture by harnessing verticality software, LEDs. And that's one of the themes I want to kind of weave through this talk, is that if there's entrepreneurs listening or future entrepreneurs, that the person you need to be to do the technical insight and is different from the person that you then have to be to go out there and productize, because the technical insight is just a glorified science project if it doesn't have a product which will go out and sell. And then if that product that's selling doesn't have a business built around it that's going to do all the mechanistic things, it won't really have any legs. And so I've also left in some of the some slides from 2019 that I would like to show you, because if you had heard this talk in 2019, I'd be giving you a lot of assumptions that we thought would happen in the business that were totally wrong, and that's the nature of the startups. So I want to show some of those things we got wrong, and very likely that many of the things I'll say about the future of the company now will end up being wrong, and we'll have to pivot accordingly. This is just kind of a sneak peek under the hood. It basically, we take some open source computers, like $35 Raspberry Pis, and you can do a whole lot with them. They can control pumps and lights and probes and dosing mechanisms that read the input from the probe and make a decision based on what the water needs. So for example, the most common one is the pH of the water is incorrect. And so let's adjust that. And that is something that the plants notice a response to, and humans usually are in a reactionary role. So we see our plants at our farm turning brown at the tips, and we react to it. And by harnessing software, we know when pH is out of range by 1/1000th of the metric used. So that's part of what makes indoor agriculture appealing to folks who are trying to scale. Obviously, it has lots of issues we'll get into in a little bit. Some of the other things it can do in terms of yield prediction and pest prediction. So in an indoor farm, it's really easy to go take a bunch of pictures of your plants, and you get you can feed those images into computer software, which says, hey, basically the greenness of the plant based on the pixel value is not as green as it's supposed to be. There could be an issue. The computer might not be smart enough to tell you what issue it is, or et cetera, but at least you know something's happening just based on greenness. You can also use this in terms of predicting yield. So is the total surface area of the unit we're growing in at the right size based on how long it is, how long it's been since we've sown the seeds, and we'll train this model, get better at growing each time. But again, these are all these sort of technical insights that I brought to basically investors, and they were like silent, and they were like, this is all very neat, but you need something to go sell out there. So anyway, so this leads to the second part of the entrepreneurial journey, which is take that technical insight and productize it. And so at Heron Farms, the first product is called Charleston sea beans. So sea beans are the American name for the plant Salicornia. It's likely growing outside right now. It's the most salt tolerant plant on the planet. If you look out into the marsh and you see Spartina everywhere, you see that tall grass. And what happens is that Spartina is a perennial, and it kind of dies back in the winter, and it forms these massive racks, which you'll find on the beach, and you'll find them especially in the high tide area of the marsh. They'll kind of get pushed up by the high tides, and they'll settle in the marsh, and they will compact the ground underneath them. They'll wash away, and then you'll have this bare patch of soil in the marsh, which we call a tidal flat or a salt pan. Water comes in at high tide, evaporates off, gets really salty. It gets so salty it will look metallic almost and white. So what Salicornia did evolutionarily is say, well, okay, all these the planet has gotten colonized, and there's not much land left. So let's learn how to handle salt and go live in these high salt areas. And so it has zero competition because nothing else can grow in those tidal flats. And what happens is these plants sequester salt, and they hold it in their upper parts, and they decrease the salt content of the soil underneath them. And then Spartina, who's less salt tolerant, comes in. And so this is kind of like the way that the marsh, it's like a marsh Band-Aid. It heals. There are natural processes which disrupt the marsh. Salicornia comes in, decreases the salt content, other plants come in. This is the succession of the marsh. Humans come along, of course, and invent dredging, and we have caused a lot of bare patches of marsh because of dredging, and we'll get into that later. But so this first product, we have we actually started growing this. This is one of the assumptions that was way wrong if I'd been given this pre-COVID. So we started growing this plant at like 5 to 10 parts per thousand. And what we were trying to do was give people a really interesting produce item that would be slightly saline. But what chefs were telling us was that they weren't thinking of it like that at all. They were thinking of it as a replacement for salt. And instead of putting finishing salt on a dish, they would use this product. And so this worked really well for our mission, because instead of using 10 parts per thousand brackish water, we actually could use full strength water, 35 parts per thousand right out of the ocean. And so that was a neat outcome of listening to our customer. This week we went into national distribution through a company called Misfits Market. So that was pretty cool, and it's been not since I last checked my emails. Not all the packages have arrived yet. One of them's in limbo, but anyways, two of the three are out into Salt Lake City and Dallas and New Jersey, and so basically the Charleston sea bean product will be in. We sent out about 16,000 little units this week, and so they'll be all around the country. We'll see how that goes. Hopefully, some interesting chefs will be using it in the coming weeks at Charleston Restaurant Week. Why is there a slide from a random other fruit? Well, one of the assumptions we got wrong here, but still is a good learning experience for our company. What we set out to do was to copy the avocado. And the avocado went to market by saying, well, we've got this interesting, delicious, healthy product, and the California Growers Association especially realized, hey, we've got this thing that we can grow in our climate, and it has no market. So what they did was they treated it as basically a luxury good. At the time, it was called the alligator pear. This is like 1950s, 1960s. Chefs in Los Angeles and San Francisco would buy this product at and if you do parity with inflation, is like $27 per avocado now. And those chefs taught people how to eat the avocado, when it was ripe, what to pay, and basically from there, and there was immigration from Central and South America where the avocado was already popular, so that's a big part of it as well. But the California Growers Association is really credited with the rollout of the avocado and how to bring it to market. And so we tried to mimic some of these things, and what we found was that by going to chefs first, chefs gave us the best feedback, but they weren't ultimately the right channel for the rollout. And so what we found is that, and COVID of course relates to this, we were going to have our first harvest in April of 2020. And if you remember March 9th or 10th of 2020, we all realized that there weren't going to be any restaurants. And so we had about a month to figure out what we were going to do. I mean, it wasn't really a big team, but what we decided to do was to take our packaging size down to this 1 ounce container, and we would find out how people were buying produce, because they weren't going to be going to the grocery store anymore. But there were a few so-called winners of this shift to e-commerce grocery, and those would be like Whole Foods / Amazon, Walmart Plus is up there, and then there's these two underdogs called Misfits Market I just mentioned, and Imperfect Foods, and both of those companies started by basically buying the carrot that was wonky, that Publix wouldn't accept, and reselling it, buying it at a discount, reselling it at a good price to people. But what they had established without realizing it at the time was they had this, when COVID hit, a network of at-home grocery subscription. And so they immediately expanded into, well, let's offer everything across the grocery aisle and in the pantry aisle and things like that. And so we've hitched our wagon onto some of those companies that are growing in what we call e-commerce grocery. This is one of those old slides I wanted to keep in to show you how wrong we were about some of the assumptions. Food Hub, we thought that seafood markets and we thought seafood markets would make up about 15 or 20% of the company's revenue, but what we didn't realize was that it was easy to sell things to a seafood market, and it was not that hard for a seafood market to sell the Charleston sea beans, but it was really, really difficult to get a product with a 10-day shelf life, packed, labeled, in a box, on a truck, or in a plane to a seafood market on time, and then give them enough time to sell it. And so we had a good time selling things. We totally underestimated the logistical nightmare that we were kind of confronting with the product that basically in 2 weeks is salt water and some plant material left, but not much. And so, but we're now kind of getting in. We've gone technical insight. We productize. Now we're getting into sort of building a company. So this is what the farm looks like in Charleston, and we also use contractor farms. And so we also have outdoor farms where we're giving them information on how to grow, and they're providing us product. This allows us to keep selling all the time. It hurts my. I would like to grow all of our own stuff, and that's just not the case. Sometimes in agriculture, you use contractors. It de-risks your own supply chain of your product. And so this is the indoor farm looking in from the front door. But what you'll notice is that I'm going on about this business, and we haven't done any restoration yet. And this is the antithesis of nature. These indoor farms are meant to block nature out, which doesn't work, by the way. It always wins. And so we control all 8 parameters: the lights, the wind, temperature of the soil, temperature of the air, the humidity, etc. And that turns out to be expensive. And if you plant a food forest, like a permaculture type of situation in your backyard, it will get better with time. These indoor farms do not. They require constant maintenance, etc. And what I'm getting to is that in order to get us to a place to have a product which tasted and looked the same every time, we had to do it really well and try to do it without nature adding too many other elements, and then give that information to the contractors. But this idea actually started in growing it in the Saltmarsh and growing it in some of those places that we talked about earlier that had been messed up by dredging. And then, so we would fix the environment and then have a product to sell at the end. That turned out not to work at all. You don't want to eat things out of a confined dredge disposal site, for one. And if you wanted to kind of plant like the intertidal zone, like you might see an oyster facility, that turns out to be kind of hard to scale as well. All sorts of inputs you can't control, etc. And so what we did was decouple the farming from the restoration, but then take the proceeds from the farming and put it into the restoration, whereby we could put seeds in the ground and then never touch them again. And so that's what we'll get into really for the last minute or two here. So I'm standing on the edge of one of these tidal flats. That plant in the picture is the one you're probably familiar seeing that people call sea pickle. Oh gosh, we've heard it called Gatorade grass. Salt daddies was one of the weirdest ones. Also glasswort. This is the perennial ancestor of the annual plant that we grow for food. This one's really, really salty. It's kind of woody. It has a lot of oxalic acid, so it's not quite the best tasting, but it's really good at spreading out into these tidal flats and sequestering salt and making the soil amenable for the next plant in succession. But our company's focusing really on these salt pans created by dredging. These are technically called CDFs, and that means confined disposal facility. We're less than a mile from one. You've probably seen it many times, called Drum Island when you go over the bridge. That used to be a marsh called Town Marsh. The we dredge our harbor and we need somewhere to put that material. A lot of it goes offshore to the offshore disposal site, but a good chunk of it stays right here in the harbor in these confined areas. You know, the first example of dredging was supposedly when the pyramids were being built and these huge blocks were coming down some of the rivers or creeks of the Nile, and the boats were kind of bumping across the bottom, and so the Egyptians would start to dig out the bottom of the canals. And then if you fast forward, you get to a guy in Charleston, South Carolina in 1860 who takes basically a steam engine and puts it on what looks like a industrial kind of oddly shaped vacuum cleaner and invents the hydraulic suction dredge right out in that harbor, called the USS Moultrie. Charleston City Council would, I guess they were a funding body at the time. Anyways, the story is that this guy invented this hydraulic suction dredge, and it was going to make Charleston's port much deeper, better for bigger ships, and the city council would not fund this idea. And so, but some folks from New York came down and funded it. Anyways, the USS Moultrie started pumping out the riverbed nearly 200 years ago, and it hasn't really stopped since. So when the first colonists came through that harbor, it was about 10 feet deep at high tide. Over the next couple of years, it's going to be down. It's going to be up to 52 feet from 47, and that's because the ships get bigger. They carry more cargo. They need more space at mean water, and of course, Charleston wants to compete with Savannah and folks, and so we're always dredging and dredging, and for good reason. We need those navigable waterways. All that sediment is going into these confined disposal facilities where it is settling, and the water is evaporating off, and it's leaving behind this really desiccated, salty surface. You probably can see Drum Island sometimes. Right now it's saturated, but you'll see that kind of looks moon-like, and it's white from the salt, and it's actually, it looks really dry, but actually the salt is reflecting a lot of sunlight, and so the underlying soil right beneath that that desiccation is actually really soupy and kind of hard to manage. And so our proposition is to go in and put native halophytes back onto those lands. When these CDFs are constructed, they are meant to block out the tides, and that is the main distribution channel for native halophyte seeds. And so we got this idea that, okay, let's go across all these CDFs and see which plants are doing well in them. And what we found was two plants were doing really well. One's a native called groundsel tree or saltbush, and the other's an invasive called salt cedar. And they both have the same characteristic, which is that they have aerial-borne seeds. And so they're like a small tree, but have a dandelion type of seed dispersal mechanism. And so the winds blow, and that's how they get their seeds onto these spaces. And so we kind of borrowed this idea from them and said, well, let's take Spartina seeds and Salicornia seeds and these native plants that are supposed to be in these spaces and put them into an unmanned aerial vehicle, aka little drones that we've converted like camera drones. And instead of the drone having a gimbal, which would move your camera, that we've taken the electronic components that would manage the gimbal and have it manage opening and closing for a hopper where seeds are, and that allows for restoration without having the plant grown in a place taken care of, and then that plug transported and then put in the ground. Because so next time you go over Drum Island, look at this south end of it. If you recall, it used to be a forest, and it was just converted back into a salt marsh. Where did all that Spartina come from? It was grown by some folks on Johns Island, and it's a heck of a process. I mean, you have to go collect all this seed at a certain time of year. Only a certain percent of it will germinate, and then you have to keep it alive for long enough and not have any pest disease issues or anything like that, and then get that plug planted at the right time and the right methods, and it's all quite expensive. So what our argument is, let's drop more volume of seed, even though we know we'll have a higher mortality rate, and bring the cost per square foot down. And what we found recently is that other businesses actually want to kind of tag along with that, and that's been really neat. And so now even products that have nothing to do with seawater agriculture are putting our logo on a given SKU and donating a little bit back to, let's say, like 1 square foot or a swath of square feet based on, you know, the product cost and things like that. So we've made a few different beverages with local companies. We hope to team up with a local sunglass company, and then we also have this mission of replacing 1 square foot of Saltmarsh for every pound we sell. And so that really is aligning with a lot of our customers, especially some of these bigger customers like Misfits Market and Imperfect Foods, and these folks who are now some of the biggest sponsors of salt marsh restoration in Charleston without them even having that connection necessarily, but nonetheless. Wrapping up, a really interesting insight from the last 2 years has been that those confined disposal facilities actually behaves not the right word, but they act very similarly to a little rectangular confined rice paddy. And so all over coastal Asia, you have these quarter-acre rice paddies, and usually a farmer would get 3 rice harvests per year, but because of the salinity and the intrusion of seawater into the aquifers and onto the land, some of them are down to 2, some of them are down to 1. Some people are not harvesting rice at all. So we went to Bangladesh with a couple other entities to say, well, let's treat a rice paddy just like a confined disposal facility. Let's put halophytes on it that are designed to pull salt out of soil, and just choose the ones that are edible. And it turned out to work. And so we're going to go back there this year with the World Food Program and scale that up. There's a lot of folks in coastal Asia that are going to have this issue of the next century. So we'll see how that one goes. I had to keep this slide in because this shows how off I was a couple of years ago. We thought we were really going to grow this company based on the backs of restaurants, and that was way wrong. But we hit 16,000 units this week, I told you, and we hope to be many more than that coming soon, and launch new products. We've really held on to this idea of what we call the Coca-Cola model, which is you don't launch a new product until your first product has good or great distribution. And so we'll see if that works. You know, people want new products. They a lot of companies, they just launch new products like they would launch like TV shows, like just get the feedback from the customer, find out what they really like. And so we're not doing that, and we'll see if that works in the end. But anyways, thank you for having me. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Cool beans. All right, we're gonna open it up to questions, both our in-person and our virtual audience. With our technical difficulties, we're gonna work off of one microphone. So I will come around, and if you have a question, let me know, and I, as an educator, will use my voice to get Sam that question here. And we'll get some from our virtual viewers as well. So if you have a question, let me know. I'll be right there. I'm going to start with a virtual question for you, Sam. We had a question of, is there any way to pack them rooted to extend shelf life? Or is the best way to buy them and store, what's the best way to buy them and store them, keep that longer?
The best way to do it would be to actually take so we grow them in these little plugs, you know, like you think of it as like the size of like an expo marker cap, right? You put a little seed in a little plug. The best thing to do would be to actually, if you guys have seen, there's a local company called Vertical Roots. Their founders gave me the lights in that early picture. They've been a really big help. And what they do across a couple of their SKUs is they sell the lettuce still attached to the plug, so it still has its roots on, and this extends the shelf life a very long time. The issue is that we're giving a product where it's not as clear as lettuce on like how to harvest it and where you should cut it and things like that. So we don't think that our customers are really ready to just like, here you go, here's the entire plant and the roots and you figure it out. But that would be the best way to increase shelf life, as well, of course, as keeping it cold. And, with these enterprise customers, we have to send little temp loggers as we go. They'll deny a shipment if it's off by 1 degree Fahrenheit. So, and then storage at your house. Most chefs will take it out of the package immediately and put it in like a damp paper towel. So I assume that they know best in that case, but I don't know. That's a great question. It didn't do anything we assumed it would do. It always is. And we've got we're at like 19 plants in the grow room. Only this one is in full production, but they never do what they do out in nature. And we could never provide the kind of environment that they want. Would you want to be the plant that was in that grow room, or would you want to be the plant that was in the marsh and there was oyster spat bumping into you and a heron walking by you and then the wind and all these things? I think at the end of April, when you can go forage the annual species, is the best time, and that's like the real nature has beaten up taste that you can't recreate indoors. And there's something about that. It's the same with any food. It's the same with livestock as soon as you turn something into a product in monoculture, it really loses some of its something. It just is not the same. And so I know the question was about the response of the plant. So yes, it physiologically responds weirdly to its new environment, but that's kind of good because you really can, with annuals, you can make them do a lot of things. You can give them different color lights to change how they behave and all sorts of things, but you really can never replicate the taste that nature gives, that's for sure.
This virtual question is very related. So you mentioned that some of the wild varietals are not as tasty. Do you select for certain qualities, or do you get your seedings locally, your seeds from the Charleston area?
So there's commercially available seeds, and it's a slightly different species. So the European variety was the first to get commercialized, and the Charleston, the native seeds are really the best. And this is not just a Charleston thing, but like Salicornia bigelovii, the plant that is native to the U.S. and to Sonora, Mexico area, really does taste the best. It doesn't have commercially available seeds, so not everyone could use it, but you can, these plants are easy to breed, and you can breed them with themselves. It's like you have one really good plant, you can make it basically flower and breed with itself. And so they're not terribly difficult to selectively breed and make your own seeds. But the answer is that the native to the U.S. Species really is the best from what we've found. We've grown a bunch of different ones. They don't like the price. Nobody. nobody likes that part. You know, indoor farms are expensive, but we want to basically compete with ourselves on price. You know, we are um, we have somewhat of a monopoly. We have a monopoly on something that has a small market, so it's not that relevant. But our price is really high for chefs. We hear this all the time because a lot of times they compare. So our price per pound, when compared to the price per pound of some hard to find fish or mollusk, looks really high. Now, 1 pound of fish is only for a few customers, whereas 1 pound of our product we usually used across like 30 to 40 dishes. But price is usually the main issue they have, and then the way they're using it. We've seen all sorts of different things, like tempura fried. We've seen them candied. They're typically used as a salt replacement on the top of the dish instead of a lot of chefs kind of finish with finishing salt, and so they're using this plant instead. But we've seen all sorts of different uses, but the main barrier to using them is the price right now, and we're trying to build a new farm this spring that will help the chefs and decrease the price. No, it's not local, and it's got a whole set of other issues involved with it. The packaging thing really is a noggin scratcher. So on the one hand, we can pull petroleum out of the ground and make a very cheap package with it, or you can grow. In our case, we take the extracts of like the corn industry. So our packaging is made of cellulose, but that has its own whole set of issues. So people that are be informed about buying plant-based packaging, because it is better than petroleum packaging in some ways, and in some ways it's got its own set of issues. And it's not compostable like in your backyard. It would take like 2 years because the technology is just not there yet. And so it's industrial compostable, which is a whole other issue. So then do you throw it away or do you recycle it? But so it's confusing for us and the customer. And not to mention they come all the way from Canada. And so it's a publicly traded company in Canada. And so we just did our scope 1 and 2 emissions with a master's student at Columbia, and she asked us every question. She knows what everyone drives, or their miles per gallon on everyone on our team, and any product or input that we use in the farm. And packaging was one of the worst. It has to come all the way from Canada on a truck, and we didn't even count the emissions that were created when they formed the plant-based package plastic. But anyways. The packaging is the best of the available options, we think, for our customers, because it's compostable. But it's a hard issue. There's some like mushroom made packaging these days that is really interesting. I think when that goes to scale, I'd love to see what happens with that.
We have another virtual question here. Does Heron Farms plan to offer community engagement activities or seeding planting that will be accessible to anyone, offer volunteer opportunities to partner with you?
Yeah, we go do some seed collection in October, and anyone's welcome to join us. We have a little sign up page on the website, and then we'll go do some planting and late February. Anyone's welcome to join us and maybe not fly the drone, but you can see how it all goes. Even our own pilot flew it into the side of his house, so it's not working right now. But tours at the farm really we haven't been doing a lot. We've had some school groups come through, but we don't really have any kind of drop-ins at the farm. But if you want to just shoot me an email, anyone's welcome to come by, but we usually try to schedule it. Just go. So the product would be considered organic, but it's hydroponic. So we use organic practices, but can't get the stamp, um, um, just like any other hydroponic farm right now, which is kind of an issue that's being worked out in Washington. You can imagine there's a lot of lettuce growers in Salinas, California that are really not excited by the idea of indoor farms getting organic stamps. So I mean, they don't care about what we're doing, but it's really the lettuce industry that is fighting to get organic certification for indoor farms. It looks like it's going to happen, but most of us are following organic practices in terms of fertilizer and things. But it comes down to the core issue. One of the ideas behind organic practices is that your soil would get better, but if you're not using soil, is it applicable? And so the pest issue. Oh my gosh. What's the term? There's a term for when someone sends you a picture and it's not really a picture of them. It's like catfishing, basically. So what indoor farms do is they like always have this like beautiful picture of the indoor farm, which I just showed you of ours. And you don't see any like macro pests that you would see on a normal farm. Like there's no deer walking into our farm eating anything. We don't have an issue with like large bugs or something like that. But we do, like any other indoor farm, have tons of issues with waterborne pests. And so we alleviate this by using something that the aquarium also uses called ozone, which adds O3 to the water. So we have a little machine that electrocutes oxygen, splits O2 into single oxygen atoms. They recombine into O3. It's very unstable. That third oxygen atom leaves the situation and goes binding around to different things in the water, like bacterial cell wall, viral cell wall. But so one of the killers of like the hydroponic system in your basement is really not any macro pests, but these little waterborne fungi and things like that from not keeping your oxygen levels as high as possible. And so the indoor farms have all sorts of pest issues. They're just not as obvious. Great question.
Got a virtual question. Why not focus on small scale farms close to local markets?
That's a good question. So there's two in the context of Heron Farms. That it might be a good idea to like deploy small farms into cities because that gives a place for people in that city to interact with this type of agriculture and to learn about the products we would have. But then there's kind of like a managerial issue with all these. So if you are a vertically integrated company and then manage a set of disaggregated farms, that presents a managerial issue. But the point I think I'm taking from the question is what I believe in, which is that like these massive vertically integrated farms and vertical farming in general and these types of monocultures really are like, they are the present. We have kind of gotten ourselves on this treadmill that we can't jump off of quite yet in terms of food production for the planet. And so the ideal food production situation would be one where, I mean, we would look at the communities that lasted the longest, and those were the communities that lived off of, that were at a smaller scale. They weren't really doing monoculture, and they were living off the land a little bit more appropriately. And that's I think for us to be around for another few millennia, that's what we're going to have to get to. Unfortunately, we found ourselves in a situation where we got really good at at doing this monoculture thing. You remember Thomas Malthus told us in the 19th century, he's like, the population curve is exponential, and the rate of agricultural output per person is linear, and those are going to cross, and we won't have enough food for people. And what he didn't predict is that agricultural technology would change the slope of that line, and it would actually keep up with population. But we've done it in such a way that uses up more fresh water than we put back. We're using soil. We're treating all of these things kind of basically like not well. So Can Heron Farms do that? It's hard to. We're a corporation. It's hard to manage a bunch of teeny farms. But should the planet go towards that? I think so.
Any more questions for our in-person audience? Wonderful. I want to say thank you so much to Sam and Heron Farms for joining us this evening. And I do want to thank our sponsors for the evening, Marion Mason Holland and Chris Cocker of Ameriprise Financial, helping our Holland lectures continue on in the 7th season. And please join us next month with Fecal Matters, getting the scoop on poop. So we're going to learn all about scat and how that can help you in your nature adventures. We will have Christina Wheeler here from the Charleston County Park. So please join us next month and look for our finale in March. Thank you.